This video is going to look at creating complex line types for AutoCAD. First of all, let's begin by looking at a complex line type in AutoCAD. I'm going to go to the line type command. And I'm going to load a complex line type. If I come down here and I'll find the one called gas line. Okay, so gas line. Load that one up, and I'm going to go ahead and just set it current rather than going through the layer. So gas line, set that current, say OK. So now when I come in here and I create a line using this, you'll see that it starts to create it here, and it's a line type file, okay, but it's got text associated with it. Now when we created the simple line type, it only had a place for down pin segments and up pin segments, but now you see we've got this, it's text in here. So we've got to look and see how can we do this so that we can create our own text segment and figure this out. Now, let's start off by looking at what AutoCAD has for the programming on this. Okay, I've copied this from the acad.lin file so that we can look at it by itself. Notice here that we've got our first row pretty much is the same as it's always been. Okay, you have the asterisk, the star, saying, hey, this is the start of a new definition as far as line types files go. And then we've got gas line. Okay, that's the name of it. Notice it's got an underscore in it because it cannot have any spaces. Okay, so gas underscore line, comma, and then this is our description, which can have spaces. Okay, so gas line, and it's a line, and then it says gas, it's a line, it says gas, and so on. So that's all the same as far as how it goes. But now things get a little bit different. So our second line still has to start with the alignment code A. Again, there's no other alignment codes used in AutoCAD, so it has to start with A, comma, and then again, it has to start with a down pin segment. It's proper to always begin your lines with that down pin segment. Okay, so here's our down pin segment, and then you'll see that we've got a -0.2, which indicates an up pin segment. Okay, and then I'm going to skip over all this stuff here in the middle for just a moment. Notice I'm going to skip over all this stuff here in the middle, and then now you can see that we've got another up pin segment. So I've got a down pin for a ½ inch, up pin for a 2/10 of an inch, something else we'll look at in a minute, and then up pin for 2/10 of or a quarter of an inch. If I come back to AutoCAD, let's look and see what they're doing here. And I can do this pretty good with dimensions. So I'm going to come over to the Annotate tab, and I'm just going to estimate here. I'll say, okay, I want a linear dimension that goes from here to there, okay? And you can see that that is 0.4994. So that's our down pin segment, right? Okay. Then if I come in here again and I do this and I say, okay, let's make another dimension, and I go from here to here. This time we've got 0.4443, or it's actually really close to 0.45 if I'd have been a little bit closer. This distance is 0.45. Well, if you think about it, 0.45 is the same thing as 0.2 plus 0.25. So what happens is in AutoCAD is there's the down pin segment, and then there's an up pin segment, maybe to about here or so. And then they insert this word called gas, and then there's another up pin segment to take us to the beginning of the next line. And that's what the rest of this code has to do with. So you have a, and then a down pin segment, and then an up pin segment, okay? And then you have some text that's going to get put in there, okay? And then you have another up pin segment, which takes us back to here. So let's look at everything inside of the square brackets here. Okay, the square brackets are the function of telling the computer that, hey, we're going to put something in here that's not a line. It has to be enclosed in those square brackets. The first thing that has to go in there is the text string that you want to include. Now the text string, you'll notice in my example, or here in the code, it has quotation marks around it. Okay, see that? It has quotation marks around it. But over here, it does not have quotation marks around it. So just like when we're writing Lisp routines, any text string has to be enclosed in quotation marks. In this case, it's going to say gas. It's comma delineated. Notice there's no spaces. Okay, so gas, comma. And then the next word here is the style. Everything that AutoCAD uses the standard style. If you choose to put in a different style, say you're going to put in a style called notes or a style called Roman S or something like that, you can do that. But if the target drawing does not have that style, it's going to revert to standard. So just be aware of that. For the exercises that we do in class, we're just going to leave this as standard. The next one here, this S is equal to 0.1. That essentially tells us the size of the text. Okay, the height of the text is 0.1. Now it's actually a little bit more complicated than that. If I come here to the style dialog box and we look at the standard style, you'll notice here that the standard style has a height of 0.0000. Okay. However, if I were to change this height to say 2 inches, okay, it would change what we have here, because what it does is it makes it a multiplier. So if I go back to this, because the height in the style was set to 0, this right here becomes the height of the text. However, in AutoCAD, if I've changed the height of the text in the style to say 2, then this becomes a multiplier. So 0.1 times 2 would be 0.2, so it would make it 0.2 of an inch tall. Okay, so just be aware that that's what that is. When we create our dimensions, or when we create our text styles in AutoCAD, we always leave this height right here as 0. So when we come to this right here, that makes our text height 1/10 of an inch. The next identifier here is a U, okay? And what that means is that our text is going to be upright and readable. There are a couple other options that we could put in there, like an R or a T, okay? R would make it tangentially rotated along with the text, and then it's not a T, it's an I can't think of what it is right now. We'll come back to that. And then what we have is an X distance and a Y distance. Okay, and I'm going to demonstrate this here in a little bit longer and a little bit more detail in just a moment. But it's basically the placement of the text itself. Okay, so there's not any real mystery here to this, except that what is this X and Y part? Well, the X and the Y is telling you how far to move from the end point here. So the X is a -0.1 and the Y is a -0.5. Okay, so I'm going to come in, I'm going to draw another text here, and let me just do this. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to switch, go back here to by layer, and then I'm just going to draw, okay, so I want a line. I'm going to make this line come down here some distance. I'm going to make it 0.5. Okay, and then I'm going to make another line segment here that is 0.45, and then I'll go 0.5. So notice that what I have here is, okay, so I have 0.5, and then 0.2 and 0.25 should be equal to 0.45. Oh, I know what I did. I messed this up, because that should line up over here. So let me move these from here to, say, that point there. So notice now that this line and this line are the same length, and this line and this line are the same length. And now what I have is I have that word gas that needs to go in the middle. Okay, if I look at this, the height on that word gas is 0.1 inches tall. Okay, so I'm going to jump back over here, and I'm just going to use dynamic text, and I'm going to say my start point is right there, and my height is 0.1, and rotation angle is 0, and I need the word gas in all capital letters, enter once, enter twice. So now if I had just left it like this, okay, you can see that I have all the same elements, but the only difference here is that this word gas is not put where it's supposed to be. Well, if we look back to this right here, you'll see that we've got first of all, we've got a down pin segment of an up pin segment of 0.2 after the 0.5, okay? So I'm going to come back over here to AutoCAD, and from, I'm going to say line, I'm going to track this over, okay? I'm going to track it over 0.2, enter, and then I'm going to go straight down, okay? So the endpoint of that line right there, that point right there is where they say their up pin segment starts, and then they put the text in, and then there's another up pin segment to get me to that end there, okay? So what they've done is, if we look at this, from that point, at the end of that 0.2, they've gone negative 0.1 in the X and negative 0.5 in the Y to get it to the Y. So if I come in here and I say, okay, let's just take, and I'm going to move this line, okay, from there, and I'll say at negative 0.1 in the X, comma, negative 0.05 in the Y, boom. You'll see what I've done is I've taken that start point and I've moved it down here. So now if I take and I put the text from the insertion point of the text to there, then what we have here is exactly what we have up there. And if I move them up super close together, you'll see that that's indeed the case. Okay, so they've got our down pin segment. Mine don't quite line up because I just eyeballed it, but you get the idea. You got a down pin segment, the text itself, and then another down pin segment. But hidden in there is the up pin segment of 0.2, the text itself, and then the up pin segment of 0.25. Now, AutoCAD makes that super difficult. I don't know why they do it that way, but it doesn't have to be that difficult. So what we're going to do is we're going to create our own line type style, and I'll call it INDR 20B, you know, just to make it, well, we'll just call it, I'll just call it INDR rather than 20B. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to plan this out for yourself. So if I come in here and I say, okay, I want to plan this line out, I'm going to just start here, and I'm going to give it a down pin segment of, we'll make it easy, number 1, enter, okay? And then, so here's going to be my down pin segment, and then I want an up pin segment of 1/2 of an inch, so I'm going to say line, and I'll track this over an up pin segment of 0.5, and now I'm going to make another down pin segment of 1. So it's going to be, you know, down for 1, up for 1/2, down for 1, up for 1/2, and so on. And in between, in this area right here, I want the text INDR, okay? So the way to do this is to kind of plan for this is to just use the text command to put some text in here. So if I say, okay, again, dynamic text, and this time to shake things up to make it a little bit different here, I'm going to change the height. So my start point, I'm going to go ahead and put it right there. My height, I'm going to make it 0.25, so it's 1/4 of an inch tall. Rotation angle is 0, and it's going to say INDR. Oh, I made it too big. So let's undo this. Let's do this again. Dynamic text. I'll go ahead and make that my start point. Instead of 0.1, though, we'll make it 0.125, 1/8 of an inch tall. Rotation angle of 0, INDR. Make it all capital letters, INDR. Enter once, enter twice. So this is my text that I want to have centered inside of here. But what I want to do is I want to say, okay, well, how big is this? So what I would suggest is just come in here and measure the length of this text. So if I come in and I say, okay, you can use the dimension command, you can use the measure command, whatever it happens to be. I'll use the distance option here. I'm going to say from that start point to where the text ends right there, okay, that distance, if we look at it, it's 0.4264. See that down there? It's 0.4264. So if I just called it 0.43, just to make it easy for text numbers, then that means that there's, you know, 0.43, and then there's a 0.07. That's this distance right here is 0.07. So 1/2 of 0.07 is 0.035. So I'm going to move this. I'm going to say move this in this direction, 0.035, enter. Okay, so now that puts the text so that it's centered inside of my dash for the most part. And then I need to move it down 1/2 of the height. So I'll say move this, my height was 1/8 of an inch, so I'll move it down 0.125. I'm sorry, my height's 1/8, so I need to move it down 1/16. Move this down a 1/16, 0.0625. So now it's pretty much centered inside of that area, and it's where I want it to be. Now, in order to figure out where my X has to be, I'm going to just draw a line from the endpoint there, to the insertion point of that text. Give me the insertion point. Bam. Okay. So that line right there represents the distance from the endpoint of the line to the insertion point of my text. Okay. And if I were to say distance from there to there, you'll see that my distance is, in the X, it's 0.035, and in the Y, it's negative 0.0625. So now, keeping that in mind, I can come in and I can write my own line type definition. So I'll just get rid of, well, I'll create it below so you guys can see what's happening here. So my new line type definition is going to be star INDR, okay, comma, okay, and then I give it a regular description. So the description is INDR, and then it's going to be, you know, like dashes. Let's just do it, kind of mimic what they did here. Dashes, and then INDR, dashes, and INDR, dashes, and INDR, and so on. Okay, so there's my pattern, or there's my description. Now going to the end, the second line, it has to start with the A, that's the alignment code, comma, and then we have our down pin segment. Okay, so I made our down pin segment, what did I make it? I made it 1 inch long. Okay, so a down pin segment of 1, comma, and then rather than an up pin segment, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it now the information for the text itself. So open square brackets, and in the parentheses or in quotation marks, I'm going to put in the text INDR. Has to be all caps, INDR. Okay, comma, and then the text style that I want, which is going to be standard, comma, and then our size. So because our text style has a height of 0, it's going to be just the size. So S is equal to 0.125, 1/8 of an inch tall, comma, and then we want the text to be upright. So we're going to say upright with a rotation angle of 0. There's a little more clarification on this in the class packer in Canvas. You can look in Canvas. So then we look at our X and our Y offsets. Okay, and that's why I left this up on the screen down here at the bottom. Our X offset is 0.035. Our Y offset is negative 0.0625. So I'll say X is equal to 0.035. Okay, and our Y offset is equal to, comma, Y is equal to negative 0.0625, so that it moves that text over a 32nd of an inch basically and down a 1/16 of an inch. And then from here we can close the brackets, put our comma in, and then put our up pin segment, which was going to be a 1/2 of an inch, negative 0.5. So what I'm doing is I'm putting all of the up pin segment on the second half rather than splitting 1/2 of it here and 1/2 of it there. It doesn't really matter because the text is going to be placed based on the end point of this point right here. So now what I can do is I can get rid of all this. Okay, and I'll save this. So we go to File, Save As. Again, we're going to change this to all files, and I'll call it INDR, just plain INDR.LIN, and say save. So now I've saved this. In order to get it to work now, what I can do is I can just come in and use that line type command and say load, and I'm going to search for, there it is, INDR.LIN, open that up and set it current, and I'll say there it is. I'm going to set that current and OK. So now when I come in here and I draw a line type, in fact, I'll line it up with this one so that you can see that they're going to match. Okay, see how it matches? It's perfect, right? So you get the idea here. That's how that's going to work. The next video that we look at is going to examine how to include shape files in a line type definition.